Right. So, Low Traffic Future, we're an alliance. We've been going kind of 3 years now, bringing together a range of organizations and individuals who have a shared vision of a less car-dependent future. We include organizations, environmental groups such as Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, CPRE, Campaign to Protect Rural England, health groups, Asthma and Lung UK, road safety groups like Brake, Road Danger Reduction Forum, as well as, if you like, the usual suspects of sustainable transport, so Campaign for Better Transport, Cycling UK, who I used to work with until just over a year ago, Liberal Streets Pedestrians Organisation, and so on. So you kind of get a range of interests and reasons for being part of Low Traffic Future. And that is reflected in the range of issues that we're dealing with. We're here to talk first and foremost about climate, but I put up, some of the co-benefit, if like the other costs of getting this wrong. Of course, the other side of that coin is, to start getting this right, then the benefits are not just about climate, they'd be about tackling congestion, air pollution, all the elements that goes with that, road injuries. I could also have had images of, obese, overweight and obese people, children aren't able to get across the road, people aren't able to get to, particularly young people who don't drive, or older people who can't drive, or whatever, people with disabilities or health conditions, who cannot get to education or work because they haven't got, because they can't drive, and everything else doesn't work for them, particularly in rural areas. So those costs, I mean, the numbers are there. I'm not going to go through it, but every one of those problems I've just touched on has a cost to it, in the billions of pounds. That's the costs of getting this stuff wrong. And then that last one, the climate issue, let's just see. I'm only going to do one graph. I was told one graph and no more. So there we are, my one graph. And if you can see that is how we've been doing since 1990 in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the UK since 1990. The yellow line is how successful we've been in decarbonising electricity. It used to be the biggest emitting sector. Now it's actually come down below even aviation, which is that bottom purple line. So surface transport is now that top purple line, accounting for 29% of planes. It's the one that's hardly come down except for that dip in sort of COVID period. It's starting to come down a little bit now. We're starting to see the effect of electric vehicles, but it reflects what Steve was saying. We've had 30 years of really not making progress in tackling the sustainable the surface transport problem. And so, as I say, the benefits of getting this right would be huge. Oh, I forgot to check whether how to click on that video. I'm going to forget the video. It could go wrong. That's if we get this right, we get clean air, safer streets, healthier communities. Where children, of the video, I'll describe it. The video is Dutch children cycling to school. 2/3 of Dutch children cycling to school. That is incredibly good for their mental health, their physical health, their social skills, their ability to navigate, their ability to understand how the roads work. They'll end up being better drivers because of their experience of being child cyclists. Loads of additional benefits to getting this right. That spidery diagram is some research was done back in the 70s in America. It's been reproduced in other places since. But it shows how many friends and acquaintances you have in your immediate neighborhoods, depending on whether you live on a heavily trafficked or a lightly trafficked street. No surprise, lightly trafficked street, the people have more friends and acquaintances among their immediate neighbors. So loads and loads of additional benefits to getting this right. So what does getting it right look like? Yes. Okay. 5 headlines. And Steve has touched on all of these. So I'll be able to canter through some of this. But yeah, getting conditions right for walking, wheeling, and cycling. This bit of terminology of wheeling is using any kind of a mobility aid, basically a wheeled vehicle that can legally be used on pavement. That is known as wheeling, and is increasingly, when people talk about active travel, they're including wheeling as well as walking and cycling. So creating good, safe, and accessible streets, safe for automobile and cycling, comprehensive, frequent, affordable community public transport, but also not forgetting shared transport and community transport. And we'll hear some more about that later. Demand reduction, Steve talked about planning. I will say a little more about that, but actually concentrating where people live, where do we build the houses to reduce the need to travel and also the demand for travel. That's, how do we make it easier for these things to work? Reduce the need for people to be driving their cars in the first place. We need to touch briefly on freight. And then I just want to say a little bit about this is it's so often perceived that this reducing card use is, yeah, that's going to work in the cities, but can't work in rural areas. I just want to say a few words about, oh, yes, it can. So what you've got on your chairs is this guide. We produced this summary guide to what we as low traffic future alliance see as should be in a good local transport plan. It's got, you know, by way of follow-up, I mean, I'm going to through what's in that document, so kind of concentrate on Beaver, and you can read the document as a reminder, a memoir for later. Yeah, that's roughly what we'll cover. So the first bit, safe and accessible streets. This is what it looks like. It looks like bollards to filter out through traffic. Incredibly cost-effective interventions. It's come to be known as low traffic neighborhoods, and they got a bit of a bad name. But actually, if you've been doing this sort of thing for years, and it wasn't controversial, it does work, and it does actually create the sort of places where people want to live. 20 mph. If I was to disagree with one thing that Steve said, the idea that 20 mph is just around schools, if we want people to walk and cycle to school, they need 20 mph from their home to school, not just immediately around the school gates. That panders the idea that if you just concentrate around the school gates, then people, the idea is they're going to drive there, it's just can they run safely from their parents' car door to the school gate? If we want people to walk and cycle all the way from home to school, then 20 mph needs to cover pretty much all the residential streets, with some exceptions. And yeah, a bit of community involvement helps make it work, help make the case that actually this stuff is popular. However noisy that minority might be, that, no, we want to drive everywhere. They are still a minority. Let's never forget it. Good signing, and there's actually opportunities to kind of create really nice urban realm, places where people want to be, want to hang out, want to sit in cafes, by designing good town, good urban design with, and it can be integrated with sustainable urban drainage. Notice all greenery as well. That is linked to creating good walkable, town centres. The cycling stuff, again, the bollards that kind of allow the cyclists to get through, and not the motor vehicles. There's also this general principle. The faster the traffic, the greater the volume of the traffic, the more you need to separate the cyclists. If you've got low traffic volumes and speeds, you don't need to separate the cyclists. The faster and heavier it is, by the time you've got to sort of, 60 mph A roads or 70 mph dual carriageways, you properly need to separate the cyclists. In between the urban street, that kind of relatively low cost intervention works perfectly well. So it depends, and it is really important you also do something about the junctions. I want to talk through the detail of what's going on there. That is effectively an attempt to replicate what the Dutch would do about traffic light junction, but adapted for English traffic rules. If only we could have some continental traffic rules, we could do that slightly differently. We also need the bridges and crossings of the really major roads. And then for just that last picture about cycle training, as Steve said, not just adult, not just children. It's also about giving adults the confidence, and particularly that need to enable the people who might otherwise think cycling is not for someone like me, people with health conditions, people with disabilities. They are probably the people who will most benefit from taking up cycling, but they're the people who are least likely to do so without a helping hand. A lot of people, Steve used the phrase, build it and they'll come. That is true for quite a lot of demographics, but there are really important demographics for whom you need more than just build it and they will come. Cycle training and other kind of targeted groups, interventions for help patients, people with disabilities, you name it, there are activities for them. We need to make sure our streets are accessible for every kind of disability. So disability is is a single term that embraces so many issues. And we need to kind of make sure that there are seats, and then that behavior change activities for people who cannot ride a normal pedal cycle. There are an awful lot of non-standard pedal cycles. I just put in that photo of Liverpool Lime Street Station. Notice how well they integrated the disabled ramp into a really good piece of urban rail. Integrating the public shared and community transport. So buses close to stations, cycling at the stations, cycle spaces on trains, level boarding onto the trains for the wheelchair users. Good bus shelters with real-time information and actual shelter and timetables. All of these things make a real difference to the to the travel experience, and those shared bikes. That's the Steve also talked about bike share, having that right next to the station and the places where people want to be able to go. All of these things about making the system joyous. I talked about reducing the need to travel, getting your planning policies right. So there's 3 pickies of what we call gentle but moderate density. So instead of building kind of sprawl all over the countryside, 2 up, 2 down, lots of car parking space, concentrate our development in urban areas, okay, and the public transport then works better, as well as using less land. You can reduce land consumption a good 60%. You hit the planning densities, but and then the transport works too, and they reinforce what. Freight, yeah, it's obvious freight and rail, but it's also about cargo bikes. I'm sorry to speed up. And yeah, rural stuff, rural buses, rural electric cars, car sharing clubs, even rural cargo bikes. That is a cargo bike in Calderdale. Hilly Calderdale, electrically powered cargo bikes still work. So, I've given you some headline recommendations. I'll leave them on the screen. Rather than try and talk through, this kind of just keeps time. Sorry for the hasty canter, but I hope that's been